All right, everyone, let's get the show started. Welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's January 26th, 2022. My name is Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator, and that means that we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it together with your team and showing them the ropes. So if that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz. For those of you new to the call, the format's very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. So feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you want to jump in and participate. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/officehours. We host these calls every week. Our call today is recorded, and we'll post a video recording of this session to our YouTube channel. So if you enjoy the content and want to support it, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. Just head over to youtube.com/cloudposse. Again, that's youtube.com/cloudposse. Also, don't forget to share the videos with your team. It's a great way to spread the word and keep everyone informed of the awesome announcements and interesting conversations we have. So with that said, let's head over to our announcements. I got a ton of announcements that came through my pipeline. So the first one is just a public service announcement or friendly reminder that Docker pricing goes into effect on 1/31, so end of the month here. For those of you who don't recall some of what that was about, is basically if your company has more than 250 employees, or more than 10 million revenue, then you are due a license fee to use Docker. A few alternatives have popped up. I'm sure some of you might have kicked the tires. Any alternatives for Docker for desktop that are convenient for developers? I'm just drawing a blank here. I don't
Something
remember
called Colima, Colima, is interesting for the Mac users out there. It uses alternative runtime engines to sort of spin up a VM and do the same deal.
All right. Colima.
Yeah, there's a Git. I found that to be kind of interesting. I haven't run into the issue where I've had to replace Docker Desktop yet, but I tinkered with this and it works side by side. So
I heard about one from Rancher as well, but I haven't used
Yeah,
that either.
that's the one I was trying to think of. Rancher, Docker.
yeah, Darren Bishop, one of the co-founders of Rancher, is saying it would be a good replacement. I don't know if that's the case, but who knows?
Worth an honorable mention at least.
Right.
And the Colima one. Cool. Next announcement is something that literally just 20 minutes ago came through my inbox. I saw. So Infracost, if you guys aren't familiar with, is a open source solution that looks at your Terraform plan and extrapolates what the cost is. It's able to do a differential cost as well. So how your Terraform plan will incrementally affect your AWS cost. Well, they naturally added support for OPA. So now you can set a policy that, fail a build that increases your cost by 10%, for example. There's GitHub Actions for Infracost, so it's very easy to start using it that way. Spacelift supports Infracost out of the box. You just set a integration token for Infracost, the Infracost API key. And I guess you can start to leverage some of that. Any other related announcements to Infracost or this announcement? All right. Small little thing, just deserves an honorable mention that I found this little thing. I thought it did a great job for a newcomer explaining how to get up and running on GitHub Actions very quickly. GitHub Actions is incredibly powerful, 1,000 options, tons of inconsistency as it's gone through multiple refactorings. I mean, the first version of GitHub Actions was actually using HCL. but settled on YAML. So what I liked about this was just an easy way to get up and running, and fully annotated example of what every line here is doing, showing all the ways like you can express an environment variable, or how to do parallel jobs, a simple example. So if you need a quick way to get up to speed on GitHub Actions, this was a good one. Vlad brought this one to my attention. I was super excited about this announcement. GitHub Actions finally supports private actions. The unfortunate thing is it's only for GitHub Enterprise. But if you are an organization on GitHub Actions Enterprise or GitHub Enterprise, you can now start creating a library of actions that are private, used only in your organization. There is a workaround to this if you want to do private actions. We talk about that in our documentation. And the example here is just to do GitHub Actions from a private repo. You can literally just clone your private repo and then refer to your actions in a relative path. So if you don't want the native support for, or if you cannot leverage rather the native support of GitHub Actions for private actions, there is a workaround. All right. This is one that I know we jumped on and enabled the setting. There was a pretty critical flaw affecting open source repositories, well, all repositories, but especially that for open source, which allowed a bypass with it using some GitHub action functionality to bypass the approval process. And that could be really bad if you're using that for branch protections, for example. So there's a write-up here more on that. Anyone looked deeper into it? So I believe there's an opt-in feature, though, that you need to enable for this. So make sure you have that. This was, I forget, was it you, Zach? Somebody brought this up in the sweetops Slack. It's yet another database migration CLI. If you're using Liquibase, for example, this is an alternative to that. I believe a couple of weeks ago, we talked about a Terraform migrations provider, SQL Migrate was the resource, third-party provider here, which looks, pretty nice. Now, let's be honest, most people doing any serious migrations probably have their framework doing it for them or using a more mature tool like Liquibase, for example. Well, this tool here aims to be one of those more mature alternatives. Now, what's interesting about it is it's actually using the HCL DSL or the HCL configuration language, it looks like, but this is not Terraform. So it's run managed by the Atlas tool itself. And I don't know.
Do you know how it manages change sets?
Do not know more about it other than headlines here, unfortunately. Has anybody already kicked the tires on this? I'm not sure who this Ariga is, this organization.
Yeah, I haven't, but it looks worthy to take a look at. It's sort of a short list of database migration tools that are available that are also declarative,
Mm-hmm. Supports MySQL and Postgres and SQLite. Okay. Next announcement. Another GitHub Actions story. Obviously, we do a lot with GitHub Actions, so it catches my eye every time I see it. What I liked about this was it's a pretty extensive write-up on how GitHub themselves use and architect their pipelines for GitHub Actions to build and release their iOS and Android apps. So you could see them dogfooding it. Not using something like Azure DevOps. Another small announcement. So SecurityHub, which is one of those solutions we support in our Cloud Posse ecosystem. We have a SecurityHub module. Now SecurityHub supports integration with AWS Health, so you can pull in AWS Health events and operate on them through SecurityHub. And similarly, confusingly, actually, to me, is Trusted Advisor now integrates with SecurityHub and can pull in SecurityHub recommendations related to the foundational security best practices conformance pack that you can enable on SecurityHub. You can now ingest that into Trusted Advisor. So in the web of AWS services, there's tighter integration. Any other interesting announcements that came across your guys' inboxes? All right. Well, let's jump into Q&A. Jim, you know, I think it's finally your turn. Your ticket is up.
Holy smoke, after what? Oh, was it been 4 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that?
I don't know. Yeah. Well, it was at least this year, not last year. So
Yeah, there's that. So that's exciting. Well, good. So I guess I'll just jump in, and really the concept here, the idea behind bringing this up was, okay, let me get some context. So I don't know if anybody saw this. So there was a rant that I sort of went off that because of the experiences that we've been having on my team, which the history there is that we had an environment that was restructured a little over a year ago, and Terraform was brought in. And then in that Terraform creation, the architect decided it'd be a really smart idea to not just instantiate the infrastructure, which is EKS based, but also to install, using the Terraform Helm provider, to install all the substrate software required as sort of the supporting supporting libraries and supporting software for our application stack with Terraform, using the Terraform Helm provider. That has caused a great deal of headache in our environment. And let me be very clear, it doesn't cause a huge headache so far. Like, it's not really a big deal in the day one operations. Day one operations, it brings it all up, all is well, everything is fine. It's typically in the day two operations where you may have to do troubleshooting, or maybe there's a tweak or something that needs to be done with the software that runs as the substrate on top of EKS. And so the problem, as I see it, is that anytime so Terraform was originally meant to be an infrastructure instantiation tool. It was not really meant to be much else than that. The whole purpose behind it was to be able to try and homogenize a way of being able to instantiate infrastructure through cloud providers. And somebody somewhere had a great idea to make it do more. And in this particular case, that was installation of software. Now, sure, I get it. There are probably some use cases where it's not a bad idea to use Terraform to install certain things in your infrastructure required for some real low-level type things to get that your infrastructure works, or your cluster or whatnot. However, and of course your mileage may vary, but it's my opinion that it's really not a good idea to use Terraform for anything more than what it was really meant to do, which is instantiation of infrastructure. And so in that case, that's why a tool like helmfile, at least in our environment, and we're still developing, I'm lead developer on that, I'm still working through that, but that's why tooling like helmfile or some other wrapper or software that is able to perform the installation of your software in your environment, I think is a much better solution, as it is decoupled from the Terraform pipeline and allows for day two operations to be much more simple and a lot easier to manage. So I wanted
Well,
to, I brought
let's
this
pause.
up.
Let's pause though for a second and introduce a few things, because not everyone comes at this with the same level of background and experience. So I think that's a good introduction of the problem statement. Is just to recap what you said there, is that there's a number of ways to deploy to Kubernetes. Some people use helmfile. Helmfile is a tool for deploying or describing declaratively all your Helm charts, and Helm charts are like packages for Kubernetes. Like an RPM is for an OS, a Helm chart is like a package and describes an architecture of an application that's deployed to Kubernetes. Helmfile was created to declaratively define all those packages you wanted to install. And Helmfile kind of precedes some of the other options out there. Like I would even say a Helmfile precedes, probably most likely it precedes Argo CD. A lot of the stuff that's been done around Argo CD. It precedes a lot of the functionality that was in Terraform and so forth. And what Jim is saying there is a good point. Like Terraform came out as a tool for provisioning infrastructure, and that infrastructure is a arbitrary term. What is infrastructure? Where's that line drawn? It's one of those things we can get into as well as part of this conversation. So you're describing that it's difficult, like that there's some rough edges, of course, with Terraform deploying things to Kubernetes, and some of those things are simplified using Helmfile, while some of those things are simple, while some of those trade-offs are also simplified using Terraform instead of Helmfile. And I'd like to go into some of those nuances as well. Okay, so how should we turn this into an actual question that we can turn around to the audience?
Okay, so that's a good question. I think first off, the best way, well, first I want to say this. My bringing this up is not meant to be anything more than observations that I've made in my day-to-day work life. And that the things that I'm talking about are really based off of my experience. I have about nearly 25 years of experience in this world, in this thing. And ever since Kubernetes came out, Helm and blah, in fact, I know some of the developers on Helm. Helm is a great tool, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter, because everybody has different use cases and better understandings of their infrastructure. So I'm coming at this as trying to be agnostic as possible as far as tooling is concerned, and trying to make the point really that in your day-to-day practice, if you're using Terraform to instantiate your infrastructure, which is somewhat of a nebulous term, but if you think about it, it's not too nebulous, because at some point it's the nuts and bolts of your setup, right? From an infrastructure perspective. So I'm just trying to get to the point that Helmfile or something else that you decide to do, that's all well and good. I think the question that should be asked is, with other people's experience and understanding that there's a gray line here. I'm not trying to define any specific line about when you should or should not to use Terraform to deploy software in certain aspects and places. It's perfectly fine. What in your experience works best when trying to define where you deploy your infrastructure and the tooling you use for that deployment, and the software that you use the term substrate is my term. It's something I use within my environment. It makes complete sense. It is the software that you need to run on your infrastructure to support the money-making bits of your application. So things like Prometheus, Alert Manager, Argo CD even. In my experience, Argo is really good for deploying our software stack, but I'm using Helmfile to deploy our substrate. And those have to be separate, because there's a chicken and egg issue there. Something has to install Argo CD because it runs in the cluster. And another really important defining thing.
Let's take a pause there. And let's start addressing some of those points here. So as we can all agree, I think the only constant in our industry is change. And it's really hard to, it's kind of like we need to date our best practices, like best practice of, 2022, 0124 is this. And then tomorrow I'm going to have a mea culpa about how I was wrong about that. And this is true even about what you're talking about. So I've Cloud Posse has been very early adopters of, for example, Helmfile, and very bullish on it. And we have, I think within our industry, or at least if I think about myself, when we find a new tool, I'm quick to think or hope or hedge, put all my eggs in that basket, hoping it solves all my problems because it's the next best thing since sliced bread. And I do this with a lot of things. We switched from Trello to Jira, and then I tried to leverage absolutely everything in Jira, and I actually turned it into a documentation system. And well, Jira's not for documentation, and it's just stupid. I say this comically. And then moving over to Confluence, using more Confluence, and then over using the wrong tool for the wrong job. And the realization I have more and more is you got to pick one thing and optimize for it. And within a given solution, you might have a few different things that comprise that solution. So when we're talking about helmfile, we were very bullish on helmfile from the get-go. We still use helmfile, but to a lesser degree because we have more options today. And when I say this, you can go to Cloud Posse Helm files and you'll see all these Helm files that we've supported, even more that we deprecated previously and had used, but no longer support. And a lot of learnings came from this experience. And that's why I think it would help to talk about what some of the problems are with the various tools and when you might want to consider using one tool or the other, and that these aren't mutually exclusive tools either. So I think to answer one of your questions, Jim, is like when to use what is a consideration. So I want to first introduce helmfile and what it might look like if you're doing. I'm going to first show a clean example of using helmfile that makes a lot of sense to probably anybody looking at this. Let's deploy Reloader, a very simple Helm chart. And in a perfect world, this is what it looks like. Basically, helmfile is a parameterized YAML file where it's pre-processed as a Go template. And then the outcome of that should be YAML, which is then interpreted as the helmfile schema, and your charts are deployed. It allows you to define everything you want to bring up your environment in Kubernetes, except for some of the most important things, and I'll get to that in a second. So if your entire application runs natively on Kubernetes, whether it be using custom resources or just native resources within Kubernetes, you can get a long way using just helmfile. And that's what we tried to do. It has escape hatches for everything, like shell scripts, like pre and post hooks. It is a Swiss Army knife that will address problems you didn't even know you had. And if you look through the examples for helmfile and what you have, you'll see what I mean. And then the reality sets in and you start implementing some really advanced things with Helm files, and you're iterating over environments, and you're dynamically, you can actually have a Helm file that generates Helm files, programmatically within your Helm file, because you want to ultimately expose a very simple interface. So this is a very gnarly Helm file here implementing OIDC ingress. And the objective here was so we could very easily just define a declarative interface that's this easy. And we offload all that complexity into this Helm file. And these decisions make a lot of sense when you first started working with Kubernetes, right? And you were just writing raw resources, and then, oh, I can't, why do I need Helm? I can just do raw resources everywhere. And then you have to deploy that app 10 times with different parameters. And you realize, oh, okay, I want something that templatized. I could write it myself, or I could use Helm. Okay, I'm going to use Helm. And then you start using Helm, and it's great. It solved all my problems. And then you start doing a lot of things with Helm, and you realize, crap, it doesn't do environment variables, or I want to parameterize my values file for Helm. And you start looking for options, and you came across like Captain, and then ultimately Helmfile, and perfect, Helmfile solved all my problems. Now I'm going to do all of that. And then you deploy all your apps, and you're almost deployed fully to Kubernetes. And then crap, I need all these IAM roles. I need this S3 bucket. I need this RDS database. I need this Elasticache cluster, etc. And you realize, well, I guess Helmfile doesn't really solve all my problems. It just solved a subset. So for what I was optimizing for at that given time. And then you start realizing there's this tool called Argo CD, and you have all this massive FOMO, realizing that all the cool kids left Helm or helmfile, and now they're just doing Argo CD with Customize, or they're using Weaveworks Flux, for example. But there's a world where all these kind of coexist. And that's what I'm coming to terms with through Cloud Posse and all of our engagements that we've worked on. So let's distill this into some of the core problems we have. We want to deploy resources to Kubernetes. So they may be defined as Helm charts. We need some way to declaratively express that. We will need some infrastructure provisioned, most likely, before we can use our Helm charts, whether it be the EKS cluster or EKS service account roles, etc. And we want it to be very easy from a day 0 or day 1 ops as much as it is day 2 operations. So when you're making updates to it. And for our applications, our bread and butter, our moneymaker apps, as you're talking about, Jim, we want those continuously delivered. We're making changes to those all the time. And the primary consumer of that stuff are the dev teams and the product teams. So I think what we need to do here is break this down into several different options and optimize for each one. And I didn't even begin to mention that probably your app today doesn't just depend on Kubernetes. You might depend on Lambdas, and those Lambdas are in the serverless framework. And then you have this React app that's deployed as a static site to S3 and CloudFront. So I think hedging all of our bets on hoping that helmfile is going to really eliminate all of our problems is not something we could do in the end. So that alone means that now we're going to support lots of different tools for delivery. So let's break down the delivery scenarios and find the best tool for each one of those scenarios. So at first, okay, so for our application teams, we kind of have gravitated now towards that we're going to support GitHub Actions for everything that isn't on, for everything up to like the point of delivering to Kubernetes. So for CI and for like delivery of SPA apps. But then for the delivery to Kubernetes, we've pretty much decided on using Argo CD. And if we're using Argo CD, we could use helmfile with Argo CD, but they're diminishing returns because helmfile is for delivery and Argo CD is for delivery. We can accomplish a lot of the same things just natively with Argo CD and application sets and so forth. So for that use case, we say, let's just use Argo CD with Helm, no helmfile. But then what deploys Argo CD? Argo CD is deployed with Helm. We can't have Argo CD deploy Argo CD, or we could, but then we'd have to delegate another cluster that has Argo CD running on this and deploys to here. Wait, but then what deployed that Argo CD? And we're in an infinite loop and segfault. So what deploys that? Well, that's where we kind of made this line in the sand. So for platform level services, shared services of the cluster that aren't the moneymaker apps that you are continuously updating, let's deploy those with Terraform, and I'll explain. So if we deploy Argo CD with Terraform, now Terraform can provision the Argo CD deployment repos that we need, where Argo CD has its artifacts. We can deploy Argo CD, the Helm chart. We can deploy Argo CD's, the needed service account roles that we need for it, the integrations with the GitHub. We can provision the Okta SAML integration, and we can just have a very elegant, seamlessly integrated solution that works great for our operators. And then what is doing the continuous delivery of Terraform? So now we've shifted the problem from like, how are we delivering to Kubernetes to how are we delivering the Terraform? And that's a problem we would need to solve anyways. And that's where we're as a company using Spacelift right now, but Atlantis or some other things might work as well.
I want to add real quick.
Yep.
A really good example is external DNS. We want to deploy that controller. We use we use Terraform for that. So we specifically use our Helm release module, our Cloud Posse / Terraform AWS Helm release, and that actually creates the IRSA role that has the Route 53 permissions, and that's a really good example of where Terraform is really powerful, right? Because you have the IAM policy, the IAM role being created, and it's just it really is the best place for this sort of thing.
Given the tools we have today.
For now.
So what's funny is I feel so guilty in some way. God, who is it? I don't remember his name. I think the conversation was about 2 years ago. It was like in 2019. I forget if the company was helmfile. Let's see. Yeah, Christopher Stovey is the guy. And his first post was like, why I just use Terraform for like deploying apps to Kubernetes. And I totally convinced him that was the wrong answer for all these reasons and why he needs to use helmfile. And we can dig up the conversation somewhere in sweetops. There's a long thread. I even recorded a selfie explaining this whole problem set to him and why he should use helmfile. And honestly, at that time, I think it was the right answer. But the mea culpa here is, or it's not a mea culpa in such sense. It's just, this is the thing about best practices, or they change. Helm has come a long, long way since that conversation, using Terraform 0.11, I think, with templates. Like there was no, you couldn't iterate over anything in a template within Terraform 0.11. The Helm provider, we were still working with Helm 2 at that point with a tiller and those problems. And now, with Helm 3, a lot has improved. We're at Terraform 1.1. Terraform template files are very robust. The Terraform provider for Helm has matured a lot. However, we found some big problems also with the Helm provider. Like if you don't have the experimental mode for manifest true on in your Terraform code using the Helm provider, you get no drift detection at all if you change your Helm charts. But this is an experimental feature that most people have off, so you would miss this. Anyways, that's why. Anyways, now my thing is this. That's why I've taken this more relaxed stance that we can coexist with all these tools. They have their place. Use the right tool for the job. Use Argo CD to improve developer experience. Use Terraform for operating your platform and your infrastructure, and then solve how you do continuous delivery with Terraform using some elegant tool like Spacelift and Zero or whatever, Scalar. Terraform Cloud, honorable mention.
I have some experience with the Helm provider. Like every time I enable this experimental flag, the experiment flag to show the manifests and show the draft detection, it just doesn't work. Like it will tell me like, when Terraform crash and tell you that this is a bug in the provider, and is inconsistent and stuff. It never worked with my Helm shows. I believe like it triggered, always triggered with the more complicated charts, like the charts that have some hooks and stuff. Like
maybe that's charts, the case. Yeah, I mean we do. We have basically migrated almost everything you see here. Well, okay, so we've walked away from a few things. We don't support Ingress Engine. Well, we actually do have this as a in Helm now, in Helm Terraform, but we've walked away from other things like the Kubernetes dashboard, Keycloak, and those things. But external DNS we're doing with Terraform, EFS we're doing with Terraform, Datadog Terraform, code we're doing GitHub Action runners with Terraform, and the Summer Wind controller, the cluster autoscaler with Terraform, Cert Manager with Terraform, Amazon Load Balancer controller with Terraform, Node Termination Handler with Terraform, reloader with Terraform external. So I mean we get by with a lot, but we've walked away from some of the more advanced things that you would deploy to Kubernetes, like Prometheus and Alert Manager, which we just don't recommend anymore for our customers.
The Airflow Helm chart was not working well with the Terraform provider. I because it was using lots of hooks, and for some reason Terraform provider was like, there was some sort of bug that it will not start the hook. for whatever reason, but like
Yeah.
it is not like the Helm provider will not work with every Helm chart. At least this was my experience.
That's correct.
Um,
Yeah, we had a lot of problems with Helm, the Helm provider. And we've had a lot of problems with the Helm provider. and that's one of the reasons why we're like, we're not using that crap anymore. It doesn't work
Yeah.
very well. And again, I think the most important point that I was trying to make with respect to what we're observing is, again, not necessarily the day one stuff. The Helm provider can install the stuff. Typically, it's not a problem, especially when you're instantiating a fresh cluster. The problem was when you're trying to manage that stuff on day two and on.
Yeah.
That's where the problems really get icky, and you end up causing more issues for yourself than actually solving. So yeah, that's
you know what we are doing. What we are doing in all our Helm charts deployed with Terraform is that I pass a random variable at each time, so it will do drift detection. So it will try to apply the chart again, because otherwise it will tell me that there's no changes, but maybe there is some changes.
With experimental
I think a really important.
No, experimental true does not work for me, so I have to do this.
Well, yeah. If you don't use it, Helm provider without experimental true, walk away, stop, just go move straight over to the Helm file provider. It just doesn't work. It is a liability. But experimental true has worked for everything we've deployed thus far. Not maybe your apps, and this is where your mileage may vary, but just because one of your apps didn't work, I argue too that, this LCD problem, trying to solve lowest common denominator, I don't think the ecosystem of Kubernetes is mature enough that we should say, well, because this one case didn't work, we have to go for the lowest common denominator. No, use the best tool that solved 99% of your job, do the exception for that one thing, and just don't write it off because of that one failure.
Yeah, I do typically agree with that concept. One of the other main points I was trying to make here is the fact that, and maybe this has shifted a little bit, but I've been using Terraform since like 0.6, and it's come a long way, and it's done a lot of changing. We talked about that last week, where they kind of started adding the ability of being able to do your if thens and your different control flows and stuff inside the code, which is kind of makes me laugh. But anyways, one of the things that I think, and this might just be a thing I'm stuck with in my head, is that Terraform is infrastructure. Everything else is software. And if you don't draw a clear line between that, you end up running into problems. Everyone's got different thoughts about this. And this was the kind of the point of what I was trying to say in the Slack conversation. But this concept breaking that concept in our environment has been just a freaking headache. And so that is why I was surfacing the concept within Slack. And this has been a good conversation, actually. I think it's been good to hear that everyone's got different use cases. They've got different ideas from which they come. And so yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, but
not to pull on the puppet string, Eric, but I think this would be a good time to point out the way you stratify your infrastructure into 4 components.
Oh, the 4 layers of infrastructure and decoupling it. And that could be actually, that is worth a consideration, Jim. I'm not going to be presumptuous and say that that any of your problems are related to this, but what he's referring to is what I call the 4 layers of infrastructure, and how we break I'm just waiting for the image to load here, how we break the layers up like this, and that the life cycles differ. And if you're trying to do, for example, WAF, but you're doing it in your foundational infrastructure layer, you're going to have pain points. So thinking about them in these compartments has at least reduced the instances of problems for us. So what I was going to bring up was just like when we were going deep on this whole issue with the Helm provider not detecting changes, what we found in our testing where we were able to reproduce all those same problems in helmfile, and as long-time helmfile users, we didn't realize it. We just assumed these things weren't happening because we've been using it since Helm 2. And it turned out a lot of these problems were introduced in Helm 3, and therefore they affected both Helmfile and the Terraform Helm provider. And what's interesting though is just 19 days ago, this three-way merge option looks like it might have just merged. And this was one of the things for Helm. This was the main problem holding up the problem in helmfile. So maybe the problem is now gone in helmfile as of 3 weeks ago, but just a heads up.
Yeah, I don't have any crazy rainbow eyes for the fact that everything is perfect with the different software decisions that are made. Obviously, we are all realists, I hope, and we realize that some things are going to work, some things are not going to work. We're going to find bugs here, bugs there. New software is going to crop up, which is better. I think this is some of the concepts you were addressing a little while ago. All I'm trying to point out is that from a cognitive perspective, at least for us, one of the things that we not only have we identified the problems with the Terraform Helm provider, Terraform, blah, blah, blah. And to your point, that very well could exist in helmfile as well. That wasn't really necessarily the point. The point was that we want to separate the two things because there's a delineation, at least in our environment, that's very clear about this is infrastructure, this is software. And by putting them together, we have a couple of issues. Is that one, the Terraform code is bloated. Our whole Terraform stuff it just sucks, because at what point do we see that we have HCL for infrastructure, and then it's clear if you understand the environment, it's clear where the delineation is. But you get some new engineer in here and they try to read that, they're gonna be like, what is this? What's going on here? And it's going to take longer to figure out. So there's a little bit of cognitive overload with respect to the Terraform HCL in its own right. And then again, to the point I was trying to make earlier, is the fact that when we actually do the deployments, and we have that, one of the things I should call out here is that we are deploying roughly, I don't know, 40 plus charts through Terraform Helm provider right now, over the spec of probably maybe 12 different clusters. So when you have that kind of an environment, it's not huge, but it's still, it's sizable enough where it's a pain in the butt to manage. This is where we're approaching, like, okay, we need to do something different here. And so what are you using to deploy helmfile, by the way? Well, again, helmfile is not currently deployed yet, and we're still trying to figure out how some of the answers here. Obviously, we have some issues. I'm not gonna mince words. We're currently working through trying to figure out how we want to properly deploy via a different type of CICD pipeline. There's a lot of manual cogs we're dealing with right now, which we're trying to work with in parallel. Helmfile is part of that conversation. We have a lot of questions we're still trying to answer. And to be frank with you, Helmfile is not necessarily the thing that we're really thinking is going to be the full-blown answer. It's more of I'm developing an MVP with it to see if it works the way we want it to work. And if it doesn't, then we have to go back to the design board and say, what is it that we need in order to make this work? So the whole thing though is that we do know for a fact in our environment, we want to separate the Terraform, the infrastructure for us is very clear from the software substrate. And that will help us to manage. There will be very clearly scoped areas that we're trying to be able to manage instead of having to always go to Terraform to do things. So another big problem with Terraform is the fact that anytime we want to deploy our substrate, we have to run Terraform, which is going to have to go through all of the infrastructure stuff first before it gets to the software stuff. And that's been another big issue. And the thing is we use Terraform Cloud. So we don't actually have something where we're running, say, TerraGrunt, and we're storing state in the cloud, and then anybody on the engineering teams can go back and run things from the command line and not have to worry about certain aspects of what that might mean as far as our infrastructure. We're running it from the cloud. I don't know if people use Terraform Cloud. It wasn't my choice. It's not a bad tool, but it does. There's some stuff. I have opinions. Let's put it that way. So
let's pause there. This has been a great conversation. Thanks, Jim, for bringing up this question. I think we got to touch on a lot of things as part of it. Let's see. I haven't been able to follow up on the Zoom chat here. What was discussed? Some people brought up using Flux CD. By the way, how you there's a very elegant way to pass values between Terraform and anything that you have in the Kubernetes cluster. Just have Terraform write all your parameters to SSM, and then use something like external secrets to automatically mount those parameters into your Kubernetes cluster. And then your Helm charts on your Kubernetes resources, whether they be deployed with Helm, Helmfile, Flux, Argo CD, anything, doesn't matter. If they're in Kubernetes, you have access to those secrets or config settings.
We use Vault.
Or Vault, something like that.
I'll have to look up this SSM thing. I'm not familiar with that. So
yeah,
the AWS
you're operating in AWS, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, external
AWS
secrets. So AWS SM is one of the services for it is parameter store, which allows you to it's basically a key value store, and you can have KMS encrypted settings or plain text settings there as well. And then there's this operator that will mount them into your cluster.
All right. Yeah, we're actually using external secrets. We're about to deprecate.
Oh, perfect. Oh,
well, we're about to get rid of it because I don't know if you ever heard of bank vaults by Von
yeah.
We use that. We use that pretty heavily, actually. So it seems like we probably do the same thing. Someone else suggested SSM then too. I've never played with it before. So this definitely looks like a direction in which we could go though.
Yeah.
We've also recently had a lot of luck with SOPs. So there's a SOPs secrets operator.
Yeah, we're gonna use that too.
Yeah, I love, for example, like Datadog agent, like API keys, just encrypt it as the SOP secret CRD and version into the repository. Doing that works fine. Works really good.
That's pretty cool. All right, I'll take a look into that one too.
Has anybody stayed on top of the announcement? SOPs was looking for maintainers.
Can I just ask a question before we change subject further?
Yeah, go for it.
It ties into what you were just saying about using Terraform to store values that your cluster needs in SSM. And I was thinking of using a different approach recently, and I'm just wondering if other people have tried that, and what are maybe some gotchas. And it's basically using Terraform to generate files, like say generate a values file or even a Helm file, because I find that just using the provider doesn't, in the long run, it doesn't really work, because sometimes you need to do a Helm diff or a Helm file diff, and you can't do that if everything is hidden in your Terraform file. But if you get Terraform to generate those files, then you can do those things. Has anyone tried that?
I would highly discourage that. If your Terraform is also not opening a pull request with those file changes, having Terraform do things locally that then need to be committed into version control and pushed up is a cumbersome workflow for GitOps, and it's really only conducive for like standard console-based Terraform administration.
Right. Okay.
So that's why, like, we had the same problems at Cloud Posse back in the day with like SSH keys, right? You might want to generate some SSH keys. So we have this AWS key pair, which we used for years. We developed this 4 years ago, but it had the same problem. 4 years ago, we weren't really practicing GitOps in the same way with continuous delivery from version control. But now we do. So then that's why we have this alternative implementation, which is generating an SSH key pair, but writes it to SSM. Thus, we don't need to worry about persisting that file that was created to disk.
Interesting.
But you did, since we're on that topic, you did remind me. So you could write these things to SSM, or you could just use the Kubernetes resource and write a raw config map or secrets map to the namespace in the cluster, that's a very viable alternative approach to get data into the cluster. So you can use Kubernetes, you can use Terraform to do what it does best, create the IAM roles, create any platform, or create any infrastructure that needs to be provisioned, like your RDS cluster, then write a secret into the namespace in your Kubernetes cluster that then all your services which are deployed with Flux or Argo CD can read.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, actually, or a config map if it's not, sensitive
Exactly.
data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Doing HashiCorp Vault integration using the CSI driver is a feasible option as well, or sidecars. I mean, there is some tight integration there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we like the Vault because it surfaces an API that's easy for us to get to. So, and then I just put something in the chat that explains kind of the way we do that, because secrets are kind of important, and we could use Vault as a KV store as well, but I'm not really in favor of that too much. I like to keep Vault as really secrets only. So we have some stuff we have to work through in that regard. I like the concept maybe of SSM. I think that's not a bad idea, and then putting that, pulling that over into the cluster. Well, I'm looking through architecting it, and we'll figure it out, whatever works best for us.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to I had with the Terraform providers that we were not able to pull charts from our ECR repos. Like technically, Helm can pull OCI artifacts, which is you can package a Helm chart as an OCI artifact and put it in ECR. But the Terraform provider was not
know that. Huh, I did not know that. That's actually really interesting. I'm gonna make a note.
Yeah, we tried it, but it didn't work with Terraform provider, but it worked with the Helm CLI.
That's interesting.
I mean, the OCI spec just got pulled out of experimental. It doesn't surprise me that some things don't support it still. You don't need prior to 3.8. Yeah. So it's not experimental now as of like a couple months ago, but
yeah, Oracle, those guys have been using Terraform for the longest to manage their infrastructure. They recently start publishing open source.
So I guess since this is then built into the underlying Helm libraries, then I guess this will probably make its way into Terraform now, as soon as they upgrade whatever Go modules they're using. But that's interesting. Definitely worth following. All right. Any other questions? We are reaching the end of the hour here. So if there's any other quick questions we can get to, I'm going to check our office hours channel as well here.
It's been a good conversation. And I apologize. I guess I kind of talked a lot, but I did wait for 3 weeks. So there's that.
Yeah, you did a good job waiting. You were very patient. Thank you, Jim. It's been a pleasure having you here.
Yeah, good conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that said, I guess we will wrap things up for today's office hours. I really appreciate everyone's contributions to the conversation and look forward again to next week's office hours. We are feverishly working to get some demo environments up so I can start showing some more behind the scenes here at Cloud Posse. So I look forward to hopefully being able to share some of that in the coming weeks as well. If you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, head over to youtube.com/cloudposse. We post all of our office hour segments there, as well as some outtakes of interesting conversations there. If you are interested to work with Cloud Posse at some point in the future to help accelerate DevOps at your organization, just head over to cloudposse.com/quiz. And it will ask you a few questions to understand your situation. So to see if we are the best company to help you out. And at the end of that, you'll be prompted to book a session, and it'll be directly with me. So if you are interested to work with Cloud Posse and 2022 is the year, do reach out, and I look forward to talking with you. If you haven't subscribed to our podcast, it's just a syndication of our office hours. You can head over to podcast.cloudposse.com. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or however you listen to podcasts. I'm available on LinkedIn. Go to linkedin.com/in/Osterman. I always like to stay in touch with everybody who's part of our community. Well, see you all next week, same place, same time. Head over to cloudposse.com/office hours to register for your invite. We host these sessions every single week at 11:30 Pacific. Take care.